By a show of hands, who attended the previous session in the same room? Okay, great. So you're already familiar with my sardonic wit. Excellent. Great, great, great. The bum news is I don't have any new materials, so the joke's on you. Good afternoon. I'm Sean Milne. I'm a county commissioner in Tooele County, Utah, the fastest place on earth. We are home to the Bonneville Salt Flats, where land speed records have been broken the globe over. So now that you're envious, I'm going to say thank you and congratulations for making it this far through the day. Hopefully you've been able to get some coffee, and we'll have a really enjoyable time. Brad is a little bit like Ben Stein, so if the monotone, no, wrong guy. Totally different policymaker though. So I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's workshop titled How Elections Shift Power in Congress, Identifying and Building Relations in a New Congress. After the elections in November, the congressional landscape has drastically shifted. Some would say better, some would say worse, but regardless, with over 100 new members of Congress, understanding how to best work with your new representative can be difficult. Just place yourself in your constituents' shoes if they didn't support you or they didn't know you, and it's the same sort of thing, right? This presentation will provide a practical example, or a few, on how to build relationships with new members of Congress and highlight the value of identifying key committee chairs and how to best build relationships with new lawmakers back home. We are, well, half of the room is here. You already know Brad, but for those that were not, we are joined today by Mr. Brad Fitch, President and CEO of the Congressional Management Foundation, or CMF. Mr. Fitch has spent 25 years in Washington, including 13 years on Capitol Hill, where he served in a variety of roles, including press secretary, legislative director, and chief of staff. I've got to ask, after that Ben Stein reference, have you ever had the opportunity to meet that guy? No. Man, he's smart, right? I mean, anybody not know who Ben Stein is? It's okay if you raise your hand and you've never seen the coolest movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, ever. No? Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Finch joined CMF in 2001 as deputy director, where he served as a management consultant for members of Congress, along with conducting congressional staff trainings, and writing publications on enhancing the performance of individual offices. Please help me welcome Mr. Finch up here with a round of applause.
Thank you again. And for those of you who were here before, I do have some new jokes, actually. So knowing that there might be some overlap between the two presentations. A couple slides overlap, but they're really important slides. As Sean said, I run an unusual organization, the Congressional Management Foundation. Our mission is to build trust and effectiveness in Congress. Clearly, I'm not very good at my job, but we're a spunky bunch. We try hard. Again, for those of you who weren't here last time, we're an unusual nonprofit organization that does two things. We focus on congressional operations. We're like the small business consultants for Congress. So we do training, consulting, research related to them, improving their operations. And we do citizen engagement, where programs like this, where we're talking to associations, nonprofits, few companies that want to have better relationships, understanding with the Congress. And as I've noted, over 60,000 Americans have participated, many of your constituents, I would hope, in one of our training programs. So as we talk about building relationships with not just new freshman lawmakers, but also the new Congress, because there was a big change in the House of Representatives, we have to start from the perspective is the picture you have of Congress is not complete. That the one portrayed in mainstream media and in Hollywood is not a complete picture of what the Congress is. In fact, if you look at the Congress as a whole, the House of Representatives, maybe 1 out of 10 might get on the weekend shows on any given weekend. They're going to run the show horses, not the work horses. You're going to be meeting with the other 90% probably. The 10% in the leadership, the committee chairman, in the leadership, the ones that get on the shows. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today mainly is that 90%. Because that is the Congress. They're the people that make the decisions. Those are the people that you're going to be trying to influence, whether it's get to co-sponsor legislation, vote for or against legislation, or just generally be supportive of your issues. So today, what we're going to talk about in this session right here is first a snapshot of a new congressional office. It's different. The freshman lawmakers act and behave differently than more senior members of Congress. How do you build relationships, especially with people who are now in decision-making leadership roles, subcommittee chairman, committee chairman, who last year were virtually powerless. Along the way, I'm going to drop on some freshman tips, some tips for building the relationship with the 106 new freshman lawmakers. 1 out of 5 members of Congress are freshmen, largest freshman class we've had since 1993, largest number of Democrats since 1974. So it's a very historic. And feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. If you see something, you see a slide that gets your interest, go ahead and ask a question. So as we look at this Congress, we all know it's historic in many ways, right? It's the most diverse ever, most women, most people of color, first two Muslim women's, first two Native American women. There's a lot of different things about this Congress. What's not different about this Congress than the other Congresses and freshmen we worked with is it's really hard setting up a freshman office. This is now my 7th class that I have worked with at the Congressional Management Foundation in helping to set up their offices. And setting up a freshman office has all the headaches in setting up a small business with all the red tape of a bureaucracy. It's a really huge challenge. One freshman lawmaker said it like this: there's so much to learn and so many people giving you advice. It's similar to inserting a garden hose in your mouth and turning on the spigot, except these days it's more like standing under Niagara Falls. That's what it's like when you're a freshman lawmaker. I'll just give you one anecdote. I was a chief of staff to a freshman member of the House of Representatives some years back. And she had got an apartment in Capitol Hill, and it was the first time in January where we had a meeting at her apartment on Capitol Hill. And it was the second week in January. And I go in there, and it's completely sparsely populated. It's like literally just like a chair and a table, and that's it. And over in the corner was all of the written materials that she had been given after Election Day. It went that high. I'm not kidding. It was that flipping out. No human being can read that. But that's what the garden hose experience is like. And as we noted, 1 out of 10 members of the Senate are new. Almost 25% of the House of Representatives are new. Here's what's not new. The volume of communications that starts burying them starts on day one. If you're in the last session, you saw this, that communications have gone through the roof since 2001, since the onslaught of the internet. It changed the economics of advocacy. In 2017, we saw another big spike because of Trump, because of the Women's March. Now, one office we looked at was the office of Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. And we saw an incredible increase in communications on education. Why? Because Betsy DeVos had been nominated to be Secretary of Education. So look at that incredible increase. There was one House office during the first quarter of 17. It was a leadership office, 4 people answering the phones. They got 1.2 million calls attempted to get through in one day. That was what it was like. Now, things have gotten a little bit back to normal, but still, it's much higher than it was in 2016 and 2015. Here's one congressional district that we were able to track. Just looking at the House, one district, they went from 9,300 email communications and letters in 2011 to 123,000. This is what it's like on Capitol Hill. We actually are now seeking the numbers. Last year, 2017, there were 28 million messages to the House. Last year, it was 23 million messages. It averages about 50,000. And as I've noted in the previous session, there has been no increase in congressional staff since 1974. No increase at all in their budget. In fact, the overall staffing you're going to see in a minute has decreased. So what does that mean for you all? Well, let's talk about building relations both with the new Congress and new members. And the first point that I want to communicate, unfortunately, is not all members of Congress are created equally, right? And that means some people's vote matters more than other people's vote. If, for example, last year you happen to be from Janesville, Wisconsin, you could get the chief of staff to the Speaker of the House of Representatives to call you back on the phone. You can still get the chief of staff to the member of Congress from Janesville, Wisconsin, probably to call back on the phone. Not the same person, not the same power structure. It's different. And what that means is power shifts in Congress means power shifts in constituents. Means some constituents matter more this year than they did last year. We were doing a training session. I got invited to do it about 5 years ago. National Hospice Action Network called me up and said, we want to do a training session for hospice nurses in Oregon next month. Why? Because the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Max Baucus, took a new job. He went to be the ambassador to China. Guess who became the new chairman of the House or Senate Finance Committee? Ron Wyden of Oregon. Suddenly, Oregon hospice nurses were really powerful. They could call the person who set healthcare policy for the Senate. Suddenly, Montana hospice nurses were not as powerful. That's how things work. Let's just look at some of the key committees. Texas lost out big time in 2018. They lost Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, Financial Services. Now we have Richie Neal of Massachusetts as chairman of Ways and Means. We have in New Jersey, Frank Pallone, chairman of Energy and Commerce. In California, Maxine Waters, Financial Services, Appropriations, Nita Lowey. That's what it means when there's power shifts in Congress. It means some people suddenly have power that didn't have them before. Now, the Senate is not as big a deal. I worked for a member in 1992 on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and he got reelected in 94 when all the power shifted. So the Democrats lost power, and he was a Democrat at the time, and it went to Republicans, and we were on appropriations, and we went from chairman to ranking member. And somebody said, well, how bad is it? He said, well, instead of deciding how 60% of the money goes, now we decide how 40% of the money goes. It's still a lot of money. You know, so the Senate's a little different when they shift power, because I always love it when these articles, you'll hear this all the time. Last year, Republicans controlled all branches of government. They control the House. They control the Senate. I worked in the Senate for 5 years. Nobody bloody controls the United States Senate. It's the Senate. The House is different. Minority, majority, that's different. But in the Senate, one person can muck it up. We're going to see that in a few days when a vote comes on President Trump's national emergency declaration, right? 4 Republican senators are going to move it to 51, and suddenly power shifts. So it's a little different in the Senate. All right, let's talk a little bit about tips for building with the new Congress. First, it's incredibly important to meet face-to-face, especially with freshman lawmakers, that they want to get to know you, and if they're in a new position of power and they suddenly have jurisdiction over your issue, or they can really make a difference, meet face-to-face with them. One staffer said this, the most effective way to influence a lawmaker is for a constituent to talk to a legislator about how the policy will affect the person or a particular group. So meet with them face-to-face. And you have a great opportunity to meet them back in their district. In a survey of members of the House of Representatives, 80% said they go back more than 40 times a year. So they're back there, and they're listening to you. We did a survey of congressional staffers and asked this question. In your opinion, how important is each of the following for understanding constituent views and opinions? So what do they do to gauge public opinion? And this is what we found out is under very important, identical form communications, not so much. In-person town hall meetings, still 36% said this was very important. A lot of you think town hall meetings are A, not being done anymore, or B, they're just crazy, raucous shout fests. Well, B, they're not crazy, raucous shout fests. They were in 2011 for 6 months, and they were in 2017 for 6 months. But they went back to normal. Average number of people is 20 to 30 people at an in-person town hall meeting. Jim Sensenbrenner, who has more town hall meetings in Wisconsin than any other member, did a town hall meeting last August. One guy showed up. They talked about net neutrality for 45 minutes. That's because that's what he wanted to talk about. He wanted to talk about net neutrality. If you go there, I'm going to talk a little bit later on about the importance of going to town hall meetings and some strategies for making yourself influential. Personalized messages from constituents. So as a county official, if you write at the top, this is the number of people that are affected, this is the number of businesses, that's going to get their attention. Meetings or attending events in the district or state. This is really important. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the strategies for attending events in the district or state with members of Congress. But meetings with staffers and meetings with members, these are the things that they're looking for. This is what they use to get public opinion. They're politicians. They're the best pollsters in the world because they're the only pollster who, if they get the answer wrong, they lose their job. And here's the funny thing. They want to say yes to you. They want to say, remember, they're politicians. One member of Congress said to me, she said, I think all members of Congress are still middle children trying to please their father. And that is just so absolutely true. All the members, I worked with a member, and this is a Democrat in 94. And he got 59% of the vote in 94. Democrat. This year they got shellacked. You know why he was mad? The governor ran for re-election the same year and got 61%. That's what bugged him. They got who cares? You know, who cares? But he did. Because that's where your politicians are. They care about that stuff. Just to amplify this particular point, one member of staffer said this, nothing replaces face-to-face interacting with staff. It matters less whether the meeting is with the state staff or DC staff, and more important that we can sit down and talk with someone. So they want to have that face-to-face interaction. They look forward to it. And for staffers and members, that's the most fun part of their job. The least fun part of their job, if you're a member of Congress, is fundraising And if you're a staffer, it's answering constituent mail. That's the least fun part. The most fun is talking policy with people like you. That's why they went and got these jobs. They're type A personalities, both staffers and members. They like to study problems, come up with solutions, and impose them on the rest of us. That's what they do for a living. They love it. They live for it. Now, where do they want to meet? We asked this question of chiefs of staff. The member of Congress prefers to have meetings with constituent groups. Where? Doesn't matter. And in-district meetings are better than DC meetings. Why? A, they're longer. The average is 30 minutes usually. It's not a little longer. B, you've usually got a champion in the room. That's that staffer, that field representative, or that district director. They view their job as having two masters. To amplify this and the importance of having constituents in the room, I interviewed one United States senator about this, and this is what he told me. I've told paid lobbyists for years that any lobbyist worth his salt will concentrate on getting my constituents to tell me what they think, not what he thinks. He better spend his time getting them to write me because that's what I listen to. So they're listening very hard for what the constituents want. Doesn't mean they're going to do exactly what the constituents want. We have a republic, not the Gallup polling organization in Washington. Okay? They do what they want to do, but they want to integrate this data into their thinking process. Let me amplify this with a little more data. And again, for those of you who were in the last session, this is the same question we asked before. We asked, how helpful is it for messages to include the following? This is what they want in these messages. By the way, we asked the same question about meetings, social media, got the same top 4 things of what they're looking for. What they're looking for is a personal story related to the bill or issue, a specific ask, and constituents' reasoning for supporting the bill or issue, and impact it would have on the district or state. So this is what they're looking for. They're looking for this information to help them understand these issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the program, go into a little more detail. Now, one of the things we found out when we were doing focus groups with our staffers on Capitol Hill is that follow-up is important. And we found the groups that do the follow-up work are incredibly more influential than the groups that don't do the follow-up work. And the reason is, in part, is fewer groups do follow-up. Most of them will come, they'll do these file lines, right? You fly to Washington, you do this, and you never follow up with an email. And you just miss that opportunity. It takes you 15 minutes. Let me give you some data to support that. In one of our surveys we did of congressional staff, we asked the following. If you are not able to provide a firm answer to their request or ask, how effective are these following follow-up activities? Now, most of the meetings you have, they will not give you a firm answer for the following reasons. 1, they just don't know. 2, they haven't thought about the issue. 3, they're afraid you're not going to like the answer. And it could be any of those 3 answers. That's the reason why you wouldn't tell somebody. But it's usually, most of the time, they're not going to have that answer. So follow-up's essential. So we asked how effective follow-ups were. Then, immediately after in the survey, we asked a second question. We changed one word. If you're not able to provide a firm answer to their request or ask, how frequently is the follow-up conducted by the following? See where we're going here? If something is very infrequent but very effective, that's a roadmap to your strategy of success. And this is what we found out, is that when it comes to phone calls from constituents, almost never do they get a follow-up phone call. And yet 22% of congressional staff would say that is very effective. Email even higher. Nearly 40%, 4 out of 10 staffers would say that's very effective, but only 8% would say that happens very frequently. So send an email, follow-up, thanking them, maybe include the handout that you have. Now, I'm going to give you a test. If you were in my last class, you can't answer this question. When is the best time to send an email to a staff member when you're thanking them? Go ahead and shout out. Immediately. That's the most common answer I get. Thank you for playing. Not the right answer. The right answer is nights and weekends, because it's counter-programming. The average number of emails LA might get can be 200 to 300 emails a day between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. You do it at 6 o'clock on a Sunday. If you're a typical Washingtonian, you're watching the Nationals win or the Redskins lose. Sorry you had to hear that joke again, Mandy. Sorry. It's true. I know, this is new. I didn't do this in the last session. So this is a true story. So it was 2009, and it was a Sunday night around 6 o'clock, and I'm watching C-SPAN. Yes, I'm a very strange man. I'm watching C-SPAN at 6 o'clock on a Sunday. But I was watching for a reason. The Affordable Care Act was being debated on the floor, and I just got to catch a couple of speeches. You know, once a staffer, always a staffer. Wanted to see who was good, who had something to say. And my congressman got up and gave a speech. I said, I got to test this. So with my Gmail account, not my Congressional Management Foundation account, my Gmail account, I knew the staffer's chief of staff email. And I emailed him, and subject line was, great speech, one-line answer, please pass on to the congressman, thought he did a terrific job on the floor. Sent that email at 6:01 p.m. Sunday night. He emailed me back at 6:06. Thanks, glad to pass it on. Boom. That's all it took. Then I told him who I was and all that. Oh, yeah. And it built the relationship, but the point was, it was Sunday night at 6. It was very relevant to that staffer, right? He was watching his boss give the speech too. I knew exactly where that staffer was. He's either home watching C-SPAN or he was in the office, right? So he was paying attention. Nobody's emailing him at 6 o'clock at night except his boss. So that's what you're doing. You're counter-programming the staffers. Now, for freshmen, to get to know them is a little different. Our first tip of the day is, freshman offices are okay with get-to-know-you meetings. Senior offices are not. So in our focus groups, we got senior staffers telling us, we hate the check-a-box meeting. We hate that, I just wanted to stay in touch with you. And they'll be nice to you. You know, they're politicians. They're not going to say when you're pissing them off. But for the freshmen, that's different. If you've never met the freshman lawmaker or the district director, they not only are fine with it, they really want to have those get-to-know-you sessions because they've got a list of stakeholders. We help them make that list. And you're on that list. If you're a county official, you're working for county government, you are on that list. I guarantee you that they have to meet that first year in office. So it's okay to have those get-to-know-you sessions. Now, to wrap this up, this first tip up, I'm going to bring in a hero of mine, and this is Cokie Roberts. If you were in the last session, I actually had a clip of Cokie from the 1990. She aged very well, actually. I actually had a chance to meet Cokie. She came to a lunch for CMF and gave a speech, and she is as charming and as amazing in public as in private as she is in public. What you may not know about Cokie is both of her parents were members of Congress. Her dad was Hal Boggs. He rose to be House Majority Leader, died tragically in a plane crash. And then her mom, Lindy Boggs, served in that seat for another 17 years. So Statuary Hall was her playground. And if you want to hear an amazing, before I run this clip from Cokie, if you want to hear an amazing speech by Cokie Roberts, she gave the eulogy at Betty Ford's funeral. Betty Ford asked her to give the eulogy, to talk about what it was like, relations in Congress in the older days. It is one of the most amazing 14-minute speeches I have ever seen. Google it, watch it on YouTube, get a hanky, because it's amazing. Yes, sir?
Before we move on to
Yeah.
what you're going to show that last slide, for those of us that are new supervisors wanting to reach out to, and I know you asked a question in the last section about being a new supervisor. So our first time in D.C., made the call to meet our representatives. But your last slide said, they're not so much interested in being bothered in that way. Don't they care about their new?
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, if you're a new supervisor, absolutely. Yeah, you're a stakeholder. They've never met you before. That's true. But you're also, I know, going in with some specific asks, whether it be about, Medicaid and prisoners or waterways or municipal bonds. They're fine with you having a specific ask. They want that. They're listening for that. That's how you hold them accountable. I had one member, it was not my boss, but I was in the meeting, and it was late on a Thursday, and clearly this guy had not gotten a lot of sleep, and this constituent group was just drowning on without an ask. And he finally interrupted him. Will you get to the point where you ask me what to do? I want to know what to do. Because it was looking at me, so they're listening for that. So if you go in with that ask, but if you're a new supervisor, absolutely. You're a new elected, this is great. They're checking a box too, even if they've been there for 20 years. The smart ones who've been there they've been there for 20 years for a reason. So they're going to want to get to know you, even if it's just a photo op. They're going to want to do it. Let's say you're meeting with a Grassley or a Hatch or somebody like, not Hatch, but somebody like that. They're going to want to get to know you. You're their eyes and ears on some levels. They treat you as political advisors. Okay, back to Cokie for a second. So Cokie got this new segment on NPR Morning Edition called Ask Cokie. It's awesome, where listeners write or call in questions. And I was listening to one of the early segments, and she got this question, which is very relevant to today's topic.
What weight do politicians give to phone calls and letters? What's the most effective way to influence our congresspeople? What do you think?
That's actually a terrific question. And the answer is that they give tremendous weight to letters and phone calls from people in their districts. If you send blast emails from some sort of organization or postcards or worst of all, phone calls, they are not only not likely to pay attention, but they're likely to get annoyed.
Get ticked off.
If you go into a congressional office and there's some phone bank thing going on, you'll see some poor harassed child sitting at the desk.
Dealing with all the phone calls.
Dealing with all the phone calls.
Welcome to my office. This is your first job.
But if it's somebody who is from the district, and particularly if it's someone who's active in the community in the district, members of Congress pay a tremendous amount of attention to those people. And the truth is, if people from a member's district go to their offices and see that member, it really can make a difference.
Are you active in your community? Can you go to their office? I mean, Koki's just backing up in qualitatively what I've been giving you quantitatively. By the way, to give you a bookend on this and to show you how much I really am a fan of Koki, about 6 months ago, she got a question on Ask Koki about whether or not Citizens United has really made grassroots obsolete, whether it's all about campaign finances. And she started her answer this way. Well, according to a survey of the Congressional Management Foundation, and I almost rolled my car off the road. I was so excited. Koki used my data. I'm so psyched. It was so exciting. It really was true. True story. 3 million listeners, by the way. I told that to my board of directors. They were happy. Okay. Next tip is build relationships with staff. Staff are very important in building new relationships with either the new leaders in Congress or the new members of Congress. One data point I'd like to share with you, staffing has actually gone down on Capitol Hill. The opposite. Everybody thinks growth in government. No, it hasn't happened. In fact, if you look just since the 1980s, the U.S. population has gone up by 50%. Individual offices have gotten no percentage increase. And the support staff for the institution has gone down by 15%. Basically, what's happened is ledge branch appropriations has gone up a little bit, but it's all gone towards security and facilities. We got a 110-year-old Camden House office building. You're going to go over there. It's getting renovated. 25-year renovation. They're going to do Longworth next. You know, that's what's happening. They're shifting money. Now, one of the things with staffers that we find is that grass tops people like you are very important to them. You're their eyes and ears. And it doesn't take a lot of you to move the needle. In one of our staff surveys, we asked this question right here. In thinking about constituents and the groups that represent them, such as associations, companies, what should they do more or less of to build a relationship with your office or senator? So this is about relationship building, not just influence. That's different. We had done survey data from 2003 to 2015 showing that what influence, I'm just giving you a little bit of the data, but we never asked about relationships. This is from our 2017 survey. And this is what we found is creating a voting scorecard, not so much. Getting to know the scheduler, chief of staff, not so much. Where it starts to get interesting is right here. Constituent meetings in the district and constituent meetings in Washington. And look, meetings in the district rank higher than DC meetings. This is a really important point, is that building relationships back home is very valuable. Get to know the district director, that's important. Provide materials in advance of meetings is something else they're looking for. And getting to know the LA is important. Now, you have here both near the top of this list, getting to know the legislative assistant and getting to know the district director. I think getting to know the district director is a more valuable strategy, and here's why. The average tenure of a House legislative assistant is 1.7 years. The average tenure of a House district director is 8.4 years. I just did a district office retreat with a member of Congress, senior member of Congress. That district director has been with her for 27 years. So that's why you get to know the district office people. And they're always looking for materials on the impact district or state. It could be just, this is the number of people in the county that are going to benefit from that. It doesn't matter. So do you want to get to know this United States Senator right here? Absolutely. But sitting on this uncomfortable chair during that entire 4-hour hearing is this guy. You want to get to know them. The other thing that when you go to Capitol Hill, and this is one of your first times, you're going to be shocked. The average age of a House legislative assistant is 27 years old. It's very young. And you're going to walk in there and you're going to say, this gal doesn't look like she could buy a beer. How is she going to understand the importance of municipal bonds? Let me give you a story to illustrate the importance of building a relationship with that 27-year-old. This story has to do with a U.S. senator. He was the keynote speaker at a major event, major hotel in D.C., much like this one. And he got there late, and the head table was all up front, and he wanted to get down his food before he had to give his keynote address. And he saw at the end of the head table the waiter passing out butter, and he wanted some butter for his bread. So he waved the waiter to come down, and the waiter saw him, waved back, and kept passing out the butter in the order of the head table. The senator got a little miffed, waved again, waiter waved again, kept passing out the butter. Well, he finally got down to the senator. The senator said, "Didn't you see me waving? I wanted some butter for my bread." And the waiter said, "Well, I did, sir, but I had to pass out the butter in the order of the head table." And the senator said, "You don't understand who I am. I'm a United States senator." And the waiter said, "You don't understand who I am. I'm the guy with the butter." These are the men and women with the butter. And before you write them off, just remember the last person that member of Congress is going to talk to before they make a decision on your issue is that 27-year-old wonderkind. So build a relationship with staffers. I talked a little bit about building a relationship with the state staff. This is also very key. Most people overlook this. They think everything is Washington. No, they become your champions. State staff view their lives as having two masters, the member and the constituent. DC staff, not as much, right? They're policy wonks. That's why they're in DC. You know, they respect constituents, but in the end, they like messing around with policy. They always are going to be the conduits for the legislative staff. And what's really important is when a member of Congress is thinking about when they hire the chief of staff or their legislative director in Washington, they're like, who knows the committee system? Who knows leadership? When they're hiring their district director, they're asking themselves, who do I want to be in a car with on the New York State Thruway when I'm driving from Schenectady to Syracuse? They hire the best friend. They hire the top political advisor. So my question to you is, do you want to be in that car too on the New York State Thruway? Do you want that district director talking about your issue? Oh, you know what? I was just talking with the Seneca County Board of Supervisor member who came here, was talking about the water issues dealing with Seneca Lake. You know, it's a big issue that we haven't talked about for a long time. Oh, really? And that's what happens. By the way, the district director, conservatively, just the amount of face time that they get with a lawmaker, with their boss, 4 or 5 times more than any other staffer. Not the chief of staff, because they're in the car together all the time. They're really joined at the hip. So keep that in mind. Okay, freshman tip. Next freshman tip is this. When you reach out to a freshman office, especially now, contact the district office first, not the DC office. Like I said previously, setting up a freshman office has got all the headaches of setting up a small business. Their small businesses are not set up yet. They get the keys to the office in their budget January 3rd. They've really been there for about 60 days. Their district office is going to be more rapidly able to process scheduling requests, meeting requests from people like you. So it's okay to contact them first. Now, you're going to see them here in DC. That's great. But when you're here, ask, if you're dealing with a freshman office, just ask them, who's your district director? I want to get to know him or her. Write down their name. Just make a point to say, oh, and by the way, subject line for, if you meet with a freshman member, this is a really good tip, folks. I know this works. I've seen it work. If you meet with a freshman member of the House and you get the name of the district director and you find out their email address, this is what your subject line will say to get an immediate answer. Met your boss in DC. That will get an email response, I assure you. Met your boss in DC. And by the way, nights and weekends, again, district staff, same way, they're going to get fewer emails. That will get an email back right away. Tip number 3, find connections in your network. You're all members of a board of supervisors, a county commission. You got other commissioners, other supervisors who didn't come. Maybe they have a relationship with the lawmaker. Think creatively as you at the center of the community. Now you got other members of your board that might be connected. You might have either be donors or you might have other constituents. You might have people who have volunteered in organizations that you're with, other allies in your community. But think about what your network is and consider not just the usual suspects, but the unusual suspects. Think about who might have a connection. Let me give you one case study example where this happened. And this does happen to deal with a food bank. We were doing training with a Kansas City food bank, Second Harvest, and she told me, the executive director told me this story. She just had brought onto her board of directors a new young woman because she had a background in digital communications, right? She wanted to help, and you guys, you probably work in nonprofits as well. You know, you try to round out the DNA of your board, get somebody young who knows how to deal with Facebook and Twitter. That was her philosophy. Well, at the first board meeting in February that the new person was there, the executive director was lamenting that in the last election, there was a flip in the state legislature. They lost their committee chairman that they knew really well, and the new chairman, no one knew, and they were really worried about this. The 27-year-old young woman raised her hand and said, well, I could probably get him to respond to my emails. And the whole board looked at her like, who's this kid? You know, why would she have a relationship? What makes you think he'll respond to your email? The executive director asked. And she said, well, he better. He came to my wedding. There you go. You may have gold in your network and not know it. A couple of years ago, I was doing research for my book, Citizens Handbook, and I was interviewing a United States senator, and I asked him to tell me a really difficult decision that he'd made. He said, oh yeah, I was really torn between two industries in my state, equally powerful industries, equally important, employed about the same people. It was basically transportation versus energy. And didn't know what to do. And then I had this 20-minute conversation with one of the company leaders in my state, and I ended up going with his view. And this, by the way, was an amendment that passed by one vote in the United States Senate, so this was the tiebreaker amendment. I said, how did that guy get through the day before the vote? He said, oh yeah, my staff, he reminded someone on my staff that our kids went to elementary school 20 years earlier at the same school. $1 billion decision, because the kids went to the same school 20 years earlier. So you want to think about that connection you might have, or someone in your network. Now, once you identify that potential connection, rate the relationship. How good are they? Some people you don't want in front of a member of Congress, right? Some people you do, some people you don't. How high quality? He came to my wedding. Okay, that's pretty close, right? That's a pretty strong relationship. Are they trusted by the lawmaker? How valuable is that lawmaker to your cause? This is really important to scope. Is somebody on the Energy and Water Subcommittee for Appropriations? Okay, that's a pretty important person to you right now, right? Who's on Senate Finance, dealing with municipal bonds? That's somebody that's important to you. How much will they do is another. Will they make an investment? Will they contact them 3 or 4 times a year? That's all it takes, by the way, is 3 or 4 times a year. Now, this next tip is one of my favorite tips. This is probably one of the best kept secrets about how to find a connection to a lawmaker that is really dated and really old. You go and find the first major newspaper profile of the candidate. Every newspaper, every candidate running for office has that one profile, right? That one profile piece for a House or Senate members, and it delves back into them and it goes into a level of detail that you never knew. Anybody here from Ohio? Ohio, okay. This is a real tough question, sir, and if you know the answer to the question, you're going to win today's prize because no one's ever got it right. Sherry Brown, senator from Ohio, got great Senator Rob Portman, also amazing senator, always wears on his lapel pin a canary. Why does he wear a canary and not an American flag? What's the connection? He wants to listen to the canary. Good guess. No, but no one's ever knows. His grandfather was a general practitioner, a doctor. And he worked in eastern Ohio. What's in eastern Ohio? Coal mines. And people who have black lung disease. And that's Senator Brown's way of connecting to the common man and say, I'm never going to forget. Now, if you're a doctor and you walk in to talk to Senator Brown about providing loan reimbursements to medical students who want to work in rural areas, is he going to be more or less likely to support you because you're a doctor? He sees your grandfather. He sees his grandfather. That's the connection. So, how many of you, anybody from Pennsylvania in the room? Nobody? Okay. You got a great congresswoman here in Pennsylvania, Sally Wild. I came across this article, 5 things you probably don't know about the Lehigh Valley's first congresswoman. First woman serves Congress. And I found out Wild's grandmother, Gladys Webster, was among the first female broadcasters in the late 40s and early 50s. Now, if you're with a local TV station or you're with the National Association of Broadcasters, what kind of reception are you going to get when you walk into the Wild office? So what connection do you have with that lawmaker that you can find out that might bring you? You're already elected officials, that's one bond, but there might be something else. Tip number 4, we talked about engaging them in the district, but let me go down to a little more detail. Photo ops are really important. When I was a Senate Communications Director, 4 weeks before the recess, we would get on the phone, me, the state director, and the scheduler, and the first thing we would plan is, what's the photo? What do we want? Are we focusing on juvenile crime this time? Are we focusing on the budget? Are we focusing on transportation? We'd pick that photo and we plan backwards. And by the way, the 3 things they want in a photo more than anything else, kids, animals, and seniors. If you can get, why do you think they go to the state fair? Because you get kids and animals in the same photo. It's a twofer. It's great. Maybe and an old person there, that's even awesomer. So that's what they're looking for. You think I'm kidding. By the way, who wasn't in the room making a decision about where the senator was going to go? The senator. It's the staffers that make the decisions on what they do. And they're thinking of the photo. And what happens when they get that photo? they put it on their website. They tweet about it. So if you got people who are affected by an issue, they want to get your picture taken with you. I used to tell my staff, hard hats and smocks. That's what I wanted to see. I want to see my boss wearing a hard hat. Hairnets, not so much. Never going to live down the fact I sent him to a bubblegum factory. I thought it was a good idea. Bubblegum, everybody likes bubblegum. Who knew you had to wear hairnets? Couldn't use a single photo. Because men in hairnets is not a good scene. It just doesn't work for us. Anyway, that's what we want. Now, one of the things we've talked about is site visits, and I touched on this earlier, but let me amplify it even further. When your members trying to be visible throughout the district, how important are the following? 95% of congressional staff said site visits are important. I have no idea who the 4% were. But yes, so these things work. So let me give you a couple tips. Again, think of the photo, of what the photo is going to be. Bring in real people, people that are affected by it. Again, smocks are really good. Nurses are great. Why are nurses? Most trusted profession in America is nurses, followed by pharmacists. I have no idea how the pharmacists did that, but they are the second most trusted profession in the world. I don't know. Sorry? You don't charge anything. Right, there you go. You don't charge anything. And they also are usually 1 foot higher than you, and they kind of look down on you. I think that might be it too. But seriously, think about who's in that photo and who's going to be with them that can talk to them, give them real stories. Location, of course, very important. Thinking about outside. If you're doing waterways, having you pointing at something down here in the water. I don't care if there's nothing in the water, but just point so they get, it's an action shot. That's what they're looking for. But just think about what that setting is going to be. The average time that they spend is usually going to be about 30 to 60 minutes. Actually, we have that here. When your member attends a site visit, touring a factory, visiting a child care center, how long should the visit normally be? It's anywhere from, 30 minutes is the minimum. They won't do less than 30 minutes. I was working with the American Farm Bureau, and afterwards one of the attendees came to me and told me the story of what happened to him the previous month. The congressman for their district had a hole in the schedule, and the scheduler called up, could you come out to your farm tomorrow, and maybe could you get a couple of your local farmers there he wants to talk about coming up. Well, this was the chairman of the agriculture subcommittee that had jurisdiction over that commodity. So this farmer was like, oh. So he didn't just get 4 or 5 farmers, he got 20 farmers together. Remember, Congress stayed there for 4 hours, blew up the whole schedule that day, because he'd rather be talking to farmers than doing the other stuff on his schedule. So sometimes that does happen. They really get into it. The other thing, we talked about town hall meetings. My first job on Capitol Hill was working for a member of Congress from the state of Maryland. So I went to 100 town hall meetings over a 4-year period. Best political education I ever got. And I learned a lot about in-person town hall meetings and what works and what doesn't work. Here are some tips. Be prepared. Know your content a little bit. So know what you're talking about. Go early and meet the staff. Almost invariably at those house town hall meetings is the district director. Now, they are having fewer town hall meetings because just frankly special interest groups are blowing them up, which is a damn shame in my opinion. Look, I believe in protest. A protest is not a meeting. A meeting is a meeting. One guy came to a town hall meeting last year in Wisconsin. He had a sign, and the sign said, handmade, I didn't come here to listen to you, I came here to yell. Not exactly an effective advocacy strategy. So, and if you are in that setting and somebody's yelling, maybe you stand up for the member of Congress and say, look, Bill, could you just stop yelling for a second? At least the member of Congress is having the courtesy of having a town hall meeting. Boy, you do that, you're going to be gold forever in that member's eyes. If you can get a couple people to go with you, nothing says listen to me like a small mob. If you can wear the same T-shirts, that's even better. I know you can't, but we always paid attention to people wearing the same color T-shirts. I'm not kidding. I mean, I remember my boss was pro-free trade, and we had lots of labor unions near Baltimore, and we went to a town hall meeting that he had organized, and the longshoremen showed up wearing ill-fitting yellow T-shirts, and there's like 50 of them walking in at the same time, and I just turned to my boss, we're not getting out of here alive, boss. By the way, I'll meet you in the car. It was really scary. They were fine. They were good. Leave paper. Have a handout. I was interviewing a senator for my book, and I asked him, I knew he had town hall meetings. What do you get out of town hall meetings? And he went to his desk and he pulled off a piece of paper. And I asked him, what are you going to do with that piece of paper? He said, well, after this meeting with you, I'm going to go hand it to the senior legislative assistant who covers health care. That's the issue the gentleman wanted to talk about, and asked my staffer to get back to that gentleman. There were 50 people at that town hall meeting. One of them built a relationship with the senior legislative assistant for health care for a United States senator on the Senate Finance Committee because that guy brought a piece of paper. Yeah. It's that simple. So bring paper. And always provide feedback to the NACo office. Draw that connection. You know, if you do go to a town hall meeting, that is so powerful. When you have, like, Matt Chase will go into a meeting with a lawmaker and say, you know, I was talking to Hugh from Poughkeepsie, and he said he went to your town hall meeting, Congresswoman, and that he asked if you were going to co-sponsor this legislation. And I want to know, you know, what should I tell Phil back in Poughkeepsie? The number of times that happened to me in 13 years Capitol Hill, maybe 4 times, and scared the hell out of me. It's like, oh my gosh, they're actually talking to each other. It just gives a level of respect. The next thing I would encourage you to do is telephone town hall meetings. Now, telephone town hall meetings have gotten a very bad rap. Members are being accused of dodging constituents. It's not true. Telephone town hall meetings are just like regular town hall meetings. The only difference is you can't yell at them, and they're shorter. That's the only difference. And we have done more research on online and telephone town hall meetings than any other organization in America. I don't even know if anybody else has done research, but we've done a lot of research. And if I have one complaint, is members of Congress talk too much. And they repeat themselves. And they should listen more. But I'm working on it. Telephone town hall meetings are really important to ask a question. Why? Well, this member of Congress said it best. I got 6,000 people at my last teletown hall meeting. The average number of attendees at a telephone town hall meeting is 3,000 people. That's right. You put somebody on the record, a politician on the record, it's like putting it in cement. So here are some tips for telephone town hall meetings. Get invited. The best way to do that is to sign up for the e-newsletter for the member of Congress. Many members will invite all of their e-newsletter subscribers to their telephone town hall meetings. Some of them will publicize it. And I just, by the way, I signed up for an e-newsletter from my wife's parents' district. Boom, got an email, listened in. He was doing a town hall meeting on taxes, helping people prepare their taxes. It was a really good telephone town hall meeting. Always ask a question. We talked about why, get on the record. Be prepared to have your question vetted. You go into a virtual room. Hi, I'm Brad. I'm a staffer for the Congresswoman. They just want to know that you're not crazy and yell at the member. That's all they want to do, is just make sure you're not going to yell at them. Recognize you're on a big stage. Not a surprise for you because you guys are often on a big stage. Establish the credentials early on. Tell them who you are. And be concise. I like to talk from a written question and praise a legislator, even just for listening. And again, they'll just want to know what you want to ask them for. I did this. I got a call. My congressman, doing a telephone town hall. I go into the town hall. I press the button for a question. They asked me, what are you going to ask about? I said, well, recently the Affordable Care Act changed how congressional staff get their health care, which is true. They have to get it through the exchanges. And I want to ask the congressman how he thinks that's working out. There's a pause. And the staffer says, is this Brad Fitch? And I'm like, how did you know that? He says, because nobody else would ask that stupid question. It's true. Anyway, okay, next freshman tip, be patient. Remember, they've never done this before. It is impossible to explain to you how intimidated and scared these people feel. I mean, this is deer in the headlights time. They're just not ready for this. It's really intimidating for them. They get a little more comfortable in the job as it goes on, but right now, be patient with them. So give them a little time, and they will appreciate it and praise you for it. Tip number 5, engage in social media. They have not set up their constituent mail operations yet. They're just getting them set up. They are on Facebook and Twitter, and that's where you can reach them. In fact, before the election, that was a great way to reach them, is using Facebook Messenger. I gave that tip in November to one of our partners, and in 1 hour, they connected with 4 freshman lawmakers in 1 hour through Facebook Messenger. So that still works. And it doesn't take a lot of comments to get their attention. In one of our surveys with congressional staff, we asked this: how many similar comments on a social media post is enough for your office to pay attention to? And what we found remarkably was 35% said less than 10, 45% said less than 30. That's right. That's who they're listening to. But here's the trick. You got to be fast because, right, social media is a very here 1 minute, gone the next medium. We did a follow-up question to congressional staff. How long after posting an office or member comment will you review reactions? And what we found is you've got about 24 hours. That after that, the open rate starts to go way, way down. So you got about this amount of time, 72 at the most. Keep in mind, average number of meetings an office has. between the member and the staffer on a daily basis is about 25 interactions with constituents or other meetings a day, 25 a day. You wait 72 hours to send that tweet. That's 75 meetings ago. So you got to react to what they're doing in real time. But they do read it. I mean, take a look at this number down here. Only 3% said we don't review posts reacting to our activities. 90%, yeah, they all do. If they're on Twitter and Facebook, they are looking at their activities. They're monitoring their social media accounts. I was doing an interview with C-SPAN some time ago, and we had just released our social media report, and I'm about to go on, and there was a staffer watching the person on Washington Journal ahead of me talking about debt ceiling, this congresswoman, and the staffer's looking at the Twitter feed on her handheld, and she's like, oh, they didn't like that answer. Oh, they like that answer. She's getting a line-by-line analysis of the congresswoman's C-SPAN interview as it happened live. And I asked the staffer, is your boss going to see that? She said, are you kidding? She's going to grab this from my hand before she gets the elevator. She loves this. So members of Congress will be monitoring, staff will be monitoring. Here's some tips when it comes to social media, some general lessons. And that is, it's hard to change the topic. They're listening to people, mostly responding to them. So if you know they're going to have a hearing on your topic, they're going to put out a statement, be ready and give a response. So know about press events they might be doing, bill introductions, hearing schedules, anything that they're going to tweet about, going on there. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to pay attention to you if you talk about something else. If you go to meet with the member of Congress, get your picture taken with the staffer or the member and put it on your Facebook account or your county's Facebook account or your board's Facebook account. It will get the attention. If you do it with Twitter, include the handle of the member of Congress. If you're represented in New Jersey and you get to meet a Cory Booker staffer and they retweet it, you just hit 3 million people from New Jersey. If it's Claire McCaskill used to have 4 million people. Chuck Grassley's got like 2 million. So use those numbers. Next, don't forget mainstream media, not just social media. And when I mean that, letters to the editor, especially letters to the editor that mention the lawmaker, because those get read by the person you want to read them, the member of Congress. I was working as a press secretary for a U.S. senator, and every day I put the clips into him, and I could, right on top, put the clips. He could have been glossy photo on the front page of the biggest paper in the state. And buried in there is going to be a letter to the editor from the Podunk Times saying, why didn't the senator fix the pothole on Main Street last week like he promised? What do you think I got back from the senator? Circled in red, fix this on the letter to the editor. I never knew if he meant the pothole or the letter. Anyway, the point was, that's what they care about. They want to be loved by everybody. And it doesn't matter that they're on the front page of the biggest paper in the state. What they care about is everybody loving them. So the freshman tip here is especially use Facebook Messenger to connect. This is a way to connect with lawmakers, is Facebook Messenger, because they are monitoring their Facebook's account. Now, they'll have their constituent mail operation set up by about March-ish if they've got their act together, and 90% will. But until then, Facebook Messenger is where to go. We've always talked about personalizing your messages. And it doesn't take a lot of messages to get their attention. The group previously in the previous session have already seen this slide, but one of the questions we asked went like this. If your member has not arrived at a firm decision on an issue, approximately how many email messages from people who represent many constituents, such as an organization leader, elected official, or business owner, does it take for your office to consider taking the action requested? That's everybody in this room. And the number one answer is less than 10. You get 3 or 4 of your Board of Supervisors members to sign on to a letter. That's going to get the attention of lawmakers. They may not do exactly what you want it to do, but they will read it. They will see it, and that's what you want. So what are they looking for when you want to personalize that information? Well, you can talk about total revenue. You can talk about the number of people, customers, employees, citizens that are affected. Total wages if it's involved, if it's necessary. Multiplier effects. I can't talk enough about multiplier effects. They're awesome. You can talk about if you invest in this CDBG grant that's only $100,000, we're going to generate $5 million in revenue to downtown. We're going to clean up this waterway. It means X amount of dollars in tourism. So think about how the multiplier affects. And always a benefit to the taxpayer. They're always looking for that benefit to the taxpayer. Now, I talked earlier about this. I threw this question up here. I want to bring it back again because it's really a very important question. This is what they're looking for. And what they're looking for, they want a specific ask. But they really want these three things. They want the information about the impact of bill or state, personal story, and reasoning. I was interviewing in a focus group 3 chiefs of staff, and I asked them, how does your boss make decisions? What do he or she use? And one of them said this. They said, they use the 3 H's. I said, what are the 3 H's? He said, head, heart, and health. And up here you see the 3 H's. You see head, reasoning. You see heart, personal story. And you see health, impact it's having on the district or state. So remember the 3 H's. And let me amplify this with another case study. I was interviewing a member, and as you heard, some of the questions I asked were like, give me a tough decision that you made. And this one member said, yeah, I was really torn on climate change, and this was back in 06, 07, cap and trade legislation. And I decided I was going to actually try to broker a compromise between all sides. And I was like, wow, Congressman, that's tough because you have a pretty big coal presence in your state. He said, oh yeah, coal is big in my state. And I asked him, what motivated you to get involved in this issue? And he pointed to a big stack of reports over in the corner of his office. And he said, I read the UN report on climate change. Yeah, those one-pagers that you're going to be handing out there, they'll read that. The staffers will read that. They need that information. They need your perspective from the National Association of Counties. They need your local perspective. To illustrate this with a video, I'm going to bring on one of our favorite staffers from Rick Crawford's office, Jonah Shoemate. Jonah is one of these rock star chiefs of staff that really cares about management. And we asked him what they're looking for when they interact with a citizen, either in an email or when they meet with him. And he talked about personalization and humanization of the issue.
Humanization of policy is always good because you get such an abstract idea about how something can be good or how it can be bad. But when you've had somebody who's actually experienced something in a very good way, it helps build, a compelling story and a narrative for keeping a policy or even getting rid of it. The negativity also has the same effect, that if something has been in effect for a long time or going on, there's unintended consequences that you just don't see that comes from just something being in existence. And so being able to humanize something is always a very positive thing.
Sure, Gina referred to that humanization, but he's really looking for that human factor. What connects, what can they do to connect a face or a person to an issue? So my last freshman tip is this. Basic stuff like who you are, what you do is okay. For freshmen, again, for senior people, it might not be, unless you're new, as we heard here in the example. But the basic stuff is just fine. They're ready to absorb that if they're a new freshman lawmaker. With that, since it's the end of the day, I actually said I might get done a little early. No one's ever complained about getting out early. And I also know that the worst place for a speaker to be is in between his audience and the bar. So keeping that in mind. So what questions might you have, if any? There's got to be a House of Cards fan. I just wrecked their whole world out here. Yes, right up front. Mandy?
I guess it's a comment. So I made arrangements with, thank you. I made arrangements with the office of Amy Klobuchar to have a state capitol tour. And this is just my personality, but I really took some time to talk with the staff, and I'm like, take a picture with me in front of Amy's sign, and it was a big deal for me. And so everything that you're talking about in terms of getting that relationship with the staff, I mean, even my one little experience, I could tell immediately how valuable it was and mutually beneficial for everyone.
Did she show you the bloody steps?
She did not show me the bloody steps. So the intern we were joking because we were both new to the job. She just got hired on in early January as well. So
okay, I'm a history buff. I made a New Year's resolution. I was working for a U.S. Senator. I've been on the Hill for 7 years, and I said I'm going to become a tour guide because I love history. Because the Capitol building, staffers treat it like an office building, members treat it like a legislature, and citizens treat it like a shrine. This is a pilgrimage, right? This is so cool. I loved it. So I decided to become a tour guide. So this is the one story I'll leave you with, which has absolutely nothing to do with my talk. But it's a cool story. So years ago, there was a congressman, in the 1880s, named William Talby. And Congressman Talby was a tall man, and he had a nemesis working for a Kentucky newspaper in Lexington, Charles Kincaid. And Kincaid wrote a lot of nasty stuff, but nothing worse than the fact that Talby was having an affair with a young woman at the Department of Agriculture, which did not go off very well with Mrs. Talby when she read about it in the paper. Anyway, he goes to confront him literally in the rotunda, and Talby was tall and Kincaid was short, and Kincaid got picked up by Talby, shook him. He said, "Sir, you will not write such things about me ever again, or the next time we see each other, you should be armed," and dropped him on the floor like he was going to charge him to a duel. Well, Kincaid was completely embarrassed by this. He went home. He got a gun. He came back, and he was walking up the steps at the Capitol very near the members' dining room. And he said, "Congressman, I'm ready to see you now." Took out the gun and shot him in the head. Congressman Talby bled on the steps. Well, that's marble steps. He died 2 days later. He actually got off on reason for insanity. He only served 2 days in jail. And the reason we know about this is the Talby family wrote about it in the early 1920s, thought it was a miscarriage of justice. But the blood on the steps, if you know anything about marble, it's porous rock. Couldn't get the blood out. By the way, the House historians hate it when I tell that story. But it's a good story. And so if you go over there, you're going to see these blotches, these dark blotches, and that's the blood of William Talby. Now, to finish the story, the ghost story that goes along with it is really good. So the ghost of Talby is said to hang out on those steps looking to trip any reporter that goes up and down those steps. A couple years ago, I'm doing my Halloween tour, right? I'm there, and one of the reporters with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reporters there. And I tell him this story, and he laughs. He said, "Oh, give me a break, Brad." He starts walking down the steps, and he tripped. And everybody went like that. True story. Anyway, any other questions about congressional history or Capitol history or anything related to what I'm supposed to be talking about? Yes, ma'am.
Just a comment. I really appreciated what you had to say, and the fact that it was well organized and
Thank you.
And also very visual. I like graphs and I like facts, and that was very helpful.
Thank you.
And being newly elected, I listened to that from the other end too, and went, "Oh yeah, I get this even from my own little rural county here. I totally get, yeah."
The smart
Thank
ones.
you.
I'm not saying that some people occasionally get out of touch. And I will tell you one case. I couldn't believe it. I was doing this a few years ago, and a group raised their hand and said, "I've tried to get a meeting, just like you said, Brad, with the DC office district. They won't take my meeting." And this was a major association. I was like, I never heard that. A couple months later, someone came up. She told me who the member was. A couple months later, hand goes up, same member. Another year later comes by, same member, third person. Only time it's ever been referenced. Former Congressman Eric Cantor. And he's former for a reason. And on election day, when he lost his election, he was in Starbucks on Capitol Hill doing fundraising for other members of Congress. So I'm not saying they sometimes do lose touch, and as they get more senior, sometimes they say, "I'm legislating, not as representative." But even people like Chuck Grassley still has a town meeting in Iowa in every county every year and has for 30 years. They do a connection. I knew an 82-year-old member from North Carolina that went on Facebook for the first time when he was 82. And because he wanted to see what constituents were saying about him. He said, "This is a way I can see what's going on." So it is true. They do have that bond, and they will keep that bond. Most of them will. I mean, I can't remember if I said this joke in this one session. If I did this, I apologize. But they do send, some bad people here sometimes. The American public sometimes selects a cad, criminal, dare I say wiener. Yes, they do. And some of them are former congressional staff. We don't understand. Former staffers either become great members or jerks. Not in between. We don't understand. People like Ray LaHood, you may remember Ray LaHood of Illinois, longtime chief of staff to Bob Michel, then served in his seat, then was a fantastic Secretary of Transportation. We're getting rail out to Dulles in large part because of him. I mean, great member. And then you get the Wieners of the world, who just was a jerk to his staff, and obviously we know all these other things about him now. But most of them are really good, decent people, and I think if you haven't met your member, you'll believe that. I'm going to leave you one quote. We'll go a little early because it doesn't look like we have any more questions. One of the things that we try to tell citizen advocates to be effective in the long run is you got to do more than just the one-time thing. You got to be engaged regularly. Said best by my favorite founding father, Benjamin Franklin, who said this: "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn." And what you have to do is make that commitment to be involved, to 3-4 times a year interact with that lawmaker, to be their expert for them, to be on the phone and answer the call from the legislative assistant when they make that phone call and ask about the issue that you know about and that can really make the difference for your county. Well, thank you very much and good luck with your advocacy efforts.